Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our final session of the 2022 C2HR conference. I'm Ravena Valentine. I have the pleasure of sitting on the C2HR board as a member, and I'm the Senior Vice President of the People Partner team at A&E Networks. Today, I'm joined by an esteemed group of colleagues from across the industry, and we're going to explore change, culture, innovation, and how that all comes together to shape the future of work. So I'm going to do some brief introductions. I'm going to ask Sissy, Nicole, Rachel, and Kia to say a little bit about themselves. Sissy, if you wouldn't mind, let's start with you.
So hi, everyone. My name is Sissy Rajan Abraham. I'm the Vice President of Platform Technology Experience at Effectv, which is part of Comcast Advertising. I actually just recently took the role after spending 10 years with Comcast HR, leading our HR digital technology strategy. And prior to that, spent years in industry and consulting, helping companies through transformation.
Awesome. Welcome. Nicole.
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here. I am Nicole Helprin. I am the Senior Vice President of People Development for Paramount Global, and my role covers performance development, talent management, our employee engagement, and learning and development for all of Paramount's brands. So brands that you know, like Paramount Pictures, Paramount Plus Streaming, Showtime, BET, MTV, Nickelodeon, 27 different unique brands in all under that one big umbrella.
Awesome. Paramount's having a good year. Rachel, you're up.
Ravena. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Kay. I work as the Vice President of Talent and Strategic Development at the Hearst Corporation. The Hearst Corporation comprises 6 major units. We have, obviously, the newspapers and magazines and broadcast stations that we are famous for in this space, but we also own a number of business-to-business media interests, including in financial services, technology, transportation, and healthcare. And in my role, I have the privilege of working across all those businesses on talent strategy, whatever is top of mind for the business units and the CHROs in each group. So it's been a really great experience. I've been here for about 3 years.
Awesome. And finally, Kia.
Hey, everybody. I am Kia Painter. I'm the incoming Chief People Officer with Cox Communications, and I'm also a member of the C2HR board and looking forward to spending some time with all of you today.
Thank you, Kia. Okay, so just a quick bit of housekeeping. As you all have been doing throughout the conference, the engagement has been amazing. Any questions you have, just throw it in the chat. We have someone who's helping us to moderate those Q&As, and we will do our best to address them along the way. So let's dive in. In a time where disruption has become commonplace, people professionals responded with resilience, agility, an incredible focus on the employee experience. We push toward the future, and we know a few things. Change is inevitable, innovation is paramount, and culture is at the heart of all of that, right? We want to make sure that at the end of the day, we are thriving and leading the way. Not to be dramatic, but changes that impact our industry, such as technology, a pandemic, consumer behavior, social justice, the labor market, politics, et cetera, have all impacted the way that we work. And we can expect that change is going to continue, right? That's the one constant is change. Well, some of us take a break and, go into cold sweats, panic. Our panel of industry professionals are game changers, and we look at this as an opportunity to innovate and grow. So in this session, we're going to get into the heads of each of you and glean some insights into how you guys embrace change, nurture your culture, reinvent the future, etc. So let's start with getting to know you all. When things are crazy, we need to remember that we have to put our oxygen masks on ourselves first. Would love to hear what you all do to stay on top of your game, stay motivated, recharge. Any advice that any of you have for your colleagues on the call to navigate the unknown? Maybe Nicole, we'll start with you.
Sure. I love this question. And I think about it a lot. And when I do think about it, I think about it as both, the question that I ask myself is, what does success look like for me? in combination with a beautiful life. And so I put work and life together, and it's really a foundation of health and well-being, but also people, connection, and the overall difference that I'm making. And I have a lot of practices and rituals. It's kind of my thing. And I'm really into the research and science of it, but just a couple of my favorite ones are, first, I am religious about sleep. So I prioritize sleep above all else. It's my number one habit. You should see me at night. I'm counting down to make sure I get my 8 hours. Like my husband knows, do not get in the way of her 8 hours. And so it's non-negotiable. And once it becomes non-negotiable, it stays that way for me. I also have really clear stop and start times for working, which I have learned that, and I like to start early when it's quiet and I don't have meetings the very first thing. But what I've found is that when I have clear start and stop times, I'm actually way more focused. I'm more engaged. I'm more productive than when I used to just spread it out throughout the day and the evening. So that encourages me to keep going with that. And then 2 other practices, I plan one thing every day that I can look forward to. And so sometimes it's in the summer, it's ending a little early and reading outside in the sun for 30 minutes, or it might be, doing a special errand or doing something fun with my kids. And then one of my favorite practices is a asynchronous gratitude practice that I've had for probably the last 10 or 15 years with my best friend. And she lives in another state. And at least once or twice a week, we send each other a voice text and we talk about what we're grateful for. We call it our 5s, the 5 things we're most grateful for. We might talk about like a problem that has come up and how we're working through it. And then we just kind of share some of the connections that we've made with each other's lives. And we only see each other twice a year, but I feel super connected to her. And it's a way for me to process like what's going on in my life in a grateful way. So those are some of my favorite practices. And my advice is to really look at taking care of yourself as a way to model leadership for the people around you and for your teams. One thing that I've learned from being deep into well-being and engagement this year is that our teams need us to role model what it looks like to take care of ourselves. And if we're struggling to get through the day, they're going to struggle to get through the day.
That is a really important point, Nicole. I think one of the things we talk about a lot at A&E is to model what good behavior looks like and start with yourself. And your point a few minutes ago about boundary creep and making sure you're setting clear boundaries speaks directly to the burnout panel we heard earlier this morning. So I think that's great. And I'm making a mental note of myself. Get more sleep. I like that one too. Kia, I think maybe you had some thoughts on the topic too.
Yeah, so very similar to Nicole, definitely going after sleep. But I also try to figure out a way to just add more fun and levity. Because if you think about it, a lot of us as HR professionals have really been the last 2 years in like this emergency responder mode where we're trying to take care of our employees. We're trying to make sure everyone is safe and healthy while also making sure we can find great people to work at our companies. And so some of the things that I do, I like to dance a lot. So every day I try to get a little bit of movement. So it may be freestyle dancing. Sometimes I'll look at YouTube videos and do a little choreography. My new thing though, that I'm in love with. So I bought an Oculus about midway through the pandemic, and it has different dance games up there. And so now I can compete with different people. And the thing I love about my Oculus, and I would never think I would be a virtual reality gal, is it forces me to be untethered from my phone. So I can't be on my phone checking email. I'm immersed in that experience, having the time of my life. So those are some of the things that I've been trying to do to add fun and levity and just to sort of renew myself as I continue to work day to day with a lot of the pressures that we face sometimes, but also making sure I create that capacity so I can remain creative and leave space to grow as well.
That's awesome. And I applaud you for rocking the Oculus because I tried it once and I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Rachel, any last thoughts before we move on to the next question?
I love that point that Kia has around just connecting also. I think that's super important. I guess the only thing I wanted to add was just a switch around mindset that I often will use. In our work, oftentimes we are the first port of call for somebody in crisis or who has an emergency. A friend of mine used to talk about how we always carry around an invisible backpack with everyone's weights in it, right? We're kind of under that kind of pressure and expectation. A previous leader of mine, who I don't know if she coined it or I heard it from her first and only, so I don't know if it's hers or somebody else's, but she often used to say, in this work, the interruptions are the job. Meaning, you often will say, I can't get any work done, I keep getting interrupted. And she would pause you and say, no, the interruptions are the job. You are there to support people in their time of need, when they need advice, a calm ear to speak with, someone to lean on. And so that always helps to reframe me whenever I'm frustrated that I don't feel like I'm getting my list done. It's usually because I'm doing something that's actually more important. So I just find that a helpful reframing.
I love that. When we think about the people space, the interruptions of the job, no 2 days are alike. We need to stay fluent across the spectrum of people and business strategy. We have to spend time keeping up with competitor news, changes in legislation, helping our workforce through changing legislation, the current labor market. I can go on and on. I was reflecting on what Nicole said about leaving voice texts for her best friend, and I'm familiar with the technology, but I haven't tried it yet. I'm wondering, how do you all stay on top of all those influencing factors that impact our worlds, right? Technology, consumer behavior, et cetera. Sissy, maybe I'll throw it to you first.
I think there's so much, right? I think we've learned over the last couple of years, right? What's happening in the world is coming into our lives and workplace where it's all just one now, right? And I think when the pandemic happened and work just happened, right, everywhere, it caused this blend. And I think, as you see that shift, the need for technology, right, the need to be digitally connected to people, I actually think helped save all of us, right, to be able to connect with loved ones or, people at work, all of those pieces. I think one of the great opportunities really is getting close and being intentional and purposeful. And I think we heard about that in the conference earlier, to the function we're doing and to the people we serve. And a lot of that, I think one of the technology trends is really looking at human-centered design. And I think that is just so key in everything you do. And that impacts both technology, how you lead with purpose, right? And I think that trend opens you up into really looking at things through the eye of the consumer and bringing that all in. I also think, of course, people, we talk a lot about AI. How can we use insights and learnings and learn from this treasure trove of data? And I'd say data is the other one too. And I think we've been talking about data for like 10, 15 years. So it's not a new concept, but I think we're not, many of us on the maturity curve have got, far ways to go to the right in getting it and learning from the data that we have and have it better serve us and our organizations to be more powerful. But I wouldn't, all of that I say, it sounds good, it sounds trendy, but I would say a lot of people jump to that, but you got to start with the fundamentals, right? You got to get to the fundamentals of, is HR arriving at its purpose, but you got to go back and say, what is that purpose? And maybe it's a little bit different department to department. And then you can graduate a little bit to, right? How do we automate more? How do we learn from the data? But, and how do we think in the eyes of, the consumer?
I love that. Those are good questions. And hopefully, as we think about those things as HR practitioners, it's helping us to shape what we want to bring to the table in the future. I don't know, Rachel or Kia, if either one of you want to add to that.
Yeah, Kia, why don't you go first?
Yeah, sure. So, one of the things that I just discovered probably a couple of months ago, I was just trying to harness, like, you get hit with so much information. What's noise? What's viable? What should you really chase after? And how do you just build good practices for seeing around the corner, just kind of knowing what's kind of coming next? And so one tool that I just passed on to a lot of you that I came across there, I'm big on aggregator sites. So these sites that kind of pull these things together for you. And one of my favorite ones right now is an aggregator site called Morning Brew. And what I love about Morning Brew, they just launched HR Brew. So in addition to understanding technology forces, what's happening in the political space, legal, environmental, with HR Brew, they're also talking about different trends that we as HR leaders and professionals need to just sort of be sensitive to. Maybe we chase after it, maybe we don't, but there's enough brewing in our ecosystem that it may be worthwhile to go test and explore. So those are some of the things that I've been using, just as little quick tools to try to consistently understand how I might see around the corner a little differently.
Yeah, I love that. And just to build on what you're saying, because I am not as sophisticated as you in finding aggregator sites. I find aggregator humans. And so I have, this is a strength I have of some colleagues that I work with where, you know, one of my team members is really good at being in tune with HR trends and compensation trends. And, you know, she often used to just mention a nugget in passing. And I said, would you please just forward me whatever, as they come through to you, you know, what something of interest. And she will do that now. And, you know, I'll always read Suzanne's emails, and she helps me stay up to date on things in the compensation space and the benefits space, which is great. So that's, I think, super important. So whether you find it through external sites or people that you work with, I think you can be proactive on that. The other angle, I think, is just to be a credible business partner with your colleagues outside of the HR function. I think it's also important to know what's happening in the industries. And so, you know, identifying the relevant trade or the trade magazines or trade sites and things like that, I find pretty valuable, or just general, you know, just general news. But I think making time in the day to actually look at the news, what's going on, what's happening with competitors will make you a more credible thought partner as you talk about the broader strategy.
I think those are really good points, Kia and Rachel. And I think, you know, as you talk about making time in the day to stay connected, now more than ever, I feel like our employee population and even our customers expect us as companies to have a point of view, to even take action, right? Become activists on social, political, and environmental issues. So you have to stay connected to what's going on during the day, every day. How has the importance of purpose and employer stance on issues to employees and candidates influenced our work? Where do you see opportunities and challenges? Sissy, I'll toss that one over to you.
Yeah, you know, I think there's always going to be a challenge there because you are going to be dealing with an employee population that may have differing points of view. I think that's a challenge, but there's an incredible opportunity. And I will say, you know, over the last couple of years, really seeing Comcast lean into that. And some of the sessions that we had kind of in the wake of, right, I'd say social awakening over the world about injustice was really have those conversations and bring that to work. And I will say I benefited as a person just as much as a leader, sitting in those sessions, hearing people's stories, which at some points were, you know, heartbreaking, I'll tell you, but just raw and real. And then walking away from that, I'd say, you know, also forced me to kind of deal with my own moments of, right, discrimination that I pushed so far away, because you're like, you're here, you don't want to think about those things even in your own life that may have been painful, but all of it, dealing with it all together, I'd say as a team and as a company, and saying, hey, we stand, right, you know, for inclusion, we stand for diversity. It's a tremendous and powerful moment that I think corporations can have. And I think so much about the ripple that creates, right? You know, the ripple it creates within your company, but quite frankly, as individuals, when you're going home and you're sitting at the table and you're having conversations about, like, look, with maybe family members that don't feel as you do, but you're like, look, you've got to like hear people out. You know, this is the story I just heard, right? How would you like when you share these stories? I think just how impactful it's been. I think there's a tremendous opportunity within that for all of us to kind of help, you know, do some healing and maybe lead in a new way.
I agree, Sissy. It's interesting. I feel like employers have had to embrace either a new role or an enhanced role to support their people, because everyone has a voice. And I'm sure, as many of us on this call have sat across the table from the non-diverse person who's like, who's caring for my career? Also in the wake of, things as controversial as Roe v. Wade, and our employees are like, I want you to take a stance on this. It's, well, I want to support you in having your voice, but we still have work to do. It's an interesting blended line, but I feel like we have a growing responsibility, more than we ever had, to sort of be in that space with our employees. To that end, having the courage to take risks is critical in order to continue to be competitive. But sometimes it comes at a price, especially when the risk doesn't pan out. Would love your collective advice on how you've handled this. How do you propel yourself forward but stay motivated when you face a professional setback, when you stumble? What do you do to motivate and maintain engagement across your team when times are tough? Nicole, you want to take that one first?
Sure. I'm laughing because coincidentally, I had a little setback this week. So this question was really timely. And this was a case where I felt really strongly that this initiative should go a certain way, and it didn't go that way. And I might have pushed maybe too hard for it to go my way. So what I do and what I'm doing right now is what I try to do. And it's that I remind myself with like a phrase, I call it win or learn. And so it's like when something doesn't go my way, when I do not win, big or small, what can I learn from it? And if I can learn something from it that I can apply to the future, then I'm going to call it a win. And often in those voice texts to my best friend, I'm processing that in real time of how I'm turning in a not a win into a win with the learning. And then the other question that I ask myself when something, when I have a setback is, did I show up with integrity? Did I try to do the right thing? Did I not take the easy path? Did I do everything that I could do? And if not, like, what could I have done differently? And so that's a really important part. And I try and share my setbacks with my team and my process with my team, because I want them to learn from that and to be humble about that. The other thing I do with my teams is anytime I am like the new leader on the team, the first thing I tell them is, the most important skill that you are going to learn, like it or not, with me is change resiliency, because change is always coming. We are never going to get away from it. We need to expect it, just as you said in your opening. We need to expect it. We need to prepare for it. We need to see the opportunity for it. We need to know what our strengths are, what we can rely upon one another for. And we just really need to make that a valuable core skill that we can use in our professional and our personal lives. And I had a conversation about this setback with one of my employees today. And what I loved about it is we talked about, okay, it didn't go the way we want to go, but how can we be the light? How can we bring compassion and humanity to whatever way it does go and show up the very best that we can and make the very best of this? And that's really something, is that what can we do given the situation? So that's kind of my personal philosophy, and then how we navigate that together as a team.
I love that, Nicole. I'm hearing like the courage to be vulnerable is a life skill, right? Mm-hmm. It's great. Rachel, I think maybe you wanted to share some of your thoughts too.
Yeah, I mean, I first of all, I'm going to take win or learn. I like that. So thanks for that, Nicole. This is tough, right? I think the hardest thing for me in situations where I haven't succeeded the way that I wanted to was, the first step for me is always to depersonalize it, right? Yeah. I think it's very easy when you have an ego, which I have, to take a failure as a reflection on you and your skills, and take it as an indictment of your effort. And I think it's really important that you take a step back from that. And I almost pretend like I'm talking to a friend, as if I am the friend, right? What would I say to a friend who came to me with that experience? You probably depersonalize it for them pretty quickly, right? You talk about the circumstances they're in, or the external factors that led to the lack of success, and you don't lean on their failure, right? So I think if you're able to take that step back, talk to yourself as if you were talking to a trusted friend, and depersonalize it, that helps quite a bit. when all else fails, I remember, I happen to be a mother. I have a daughter. I always say to myself, okay, she still loves me. Like, this isn't the end, this isn't the end of the world. This isn't, so she still loves me, or your friend still loves me, or your parents still love you. Like, there are other people who think you're fantastic out there. So even though this didn't work today, you go back to basics and it's all gonna work out.
Give each other grace, right? Like, give each other grace to make mistakes and learn from them together and move on. Rachel, if you had a magic wand and you can make one enhancement to your HR roadmap, your career to date, resources, tools, talent programs, what would it be?
Yeah, I don't know if this is what you're looking for, Ravena, but I'll try it. So I think for me, the thing that I'm most excited about, there's been an inundation of data in our world, in the HR world, right? We can now analyze anything to the millionth degree. And that's great. Where I think we're lacking is the ability to use data to drive insights quickly. And so I think if I were to wave a magic wand, here at Hearst, we're given all kinds of lengthy reports, lengthy dashboards, but we're still not at the point yet where we're able to quickly deliver the insight. And so, for example, we're really concerned at Hearst about, and I think everywhere probably, although I'll be curious if you all have escaped this, we're very curious about attrition rates and just what's driving attrition. And, we've been tracking overall attrition. Okay, that's great. I mean, that's okay. But where the insights have really come from is when you actually dive deep and look at which populations are attriting, why, and if you can get to the root causes. And you can't do that at a surface level. But you also don't want to hand a leader of one of our businesses a stack of 50 charts, right? And so I think if we can get sophisticated about how we move from data to insights quickly and can do that better, it will make not only our lives easier, but I think it'll make us more effective counselors to our colleagues.
I love that. Learn to use data to tell a story so that you can motivate action, right? Otherwise, data is just data. 100% agree. Sissy, did you have a perspective you want to share?
Sure. As someone I think who supported HR, and now I'm sitting on the business side, probably even more stronger perspective, just about the role of HR. I think HR is really kind of diving into that foray of being strategy enablers, right? And the talent strategy enabler. But, I'd say before, sometimes, people again want everything to be, seamless and everything to be automated before you dive into that pond. But I'd say maybe, dive in, like start small with a pod of people who are really thinking about upskilling, right? Really thinking about getting it started, and let all that other work happen in parallel, but maybe live the practices of the future now just to get it started in your organization. And then you'll be able to work through all the challenges of what you learn from that to enable that experience. Like I think that is happening probably in a lot of companies and happening at various scales, but a lot of folks we all haven't found that quite right rhythm, because guess what? The rhythm keeps changing. But I think just getting it started, if you haven't, would be my counsel.
Very sound counsel. Let's pivot for a second to a topic that I think is near and dear to every HR practitioner's heart right now. This concept of returning to the office, returning to, I'm going to put in air quotes, normalcy. How do you do that and still embrace the flexibility that some have really enjoyed for quite a while? And it is a topic that is industry agnostic. Everyone is sort of navigating it. What has your company done that has resonated so well with employees in the space? And what areas are still a work in progress? Like, let's be honest about what the strides we still have to make. Nicole, I think I'll turn it over to you because I think you have pretty deep experience in this space.
Yeah. So I've worked remotely for a number of companies for 21 years. So I was ahead of the curve. And when I first started working remotely, my boss used to tell me to put a jacket on the back of my chair and leave a cookie out. So it looked like I just went and took a break, because it sometimes, has been popular and sometimes it's been not so popular. So it's really fascinating to see the world bending to my secret world that I've had for 21 years, and everyone now getting it, why I've been doing it. And so my company, Paramount, I joined at the beginning of the pandemic. So everyone, besides core essential workers and productions that were still happening, security and facilities, went from 5 days a week to fully remote, which was a huge change. We weren't even, we were like all in or all none. And so now 2 years in, the world has changed, people have changed, preferences have changed, and now we're asking about 70% to come back in a hybrid fashion, so 2 to 3 days roughly a week. And so what's working well is that recognition that we just can't go back to the way that things used to be, and that things have changed, and we've been successful doing that work. We did do, the dates kept changing. So we did a lot of prep because the dates changed, 10 times before we actually came back. So there was manager training. How do you lead a hybrid team? How do you lead a remote team? There was employee training. How do you get your needs met in a hybrid or remote world? We're really working with teams to make it worthwhile to come back to the office. So don't, set up Zoom calls where you come in, you're on Zoom, and then there's just no point of being there. How do you actually think through what days you're going to be in, how you'll collaborate differently, how you'll have some fun in the office together? We've created buddy commuting programs because there's been lots of concerns about safety and commuting in our large metro areas. So those are all things that have worked well. I think what's a work in progress is how to manage people who want full ownership over how and when they work and who decides that. And so, and balancing that with wanting to be consistent and fair, and balancing that with the type of roles that we had. And I just saw this month some new research from Gallup that talked about when people have a mismatched work preference. So that means I want to be fully remote, but I'm hybrid, or I want to be hybrid, but I'm fully on site. The data that shows how that impacts engagement, inclusion, and well-being, all things very deep to my world and my heart, can really be meaningfully negatively impacted. And so how do you work with that reality that we're all facing? And the Gallup said it's everyone, it's not your company only. How do you work within that reality? And so one of the things that we're doing is really being specific, where we're talking to each person and saying, what do you need to feel supported in this work model? Like, what can we do? What do you need? Really trying to listen. I keep telling them, like, you can't just get the list. You have to find something on the list, managers, that you can do something about. You may not be able to do something about this thing, but find something that you can do to support your people. And, a lot of it is about empathy as well, of like, not just taking your own preference and your own perspective as a leader or manager and projecting that on your employees, but really understanding that we all have different lives and situations, and using more empathy in connecting with people about that. So we've been leaning into internal empathy training a lot more.
Wow, that is a very deep set of experiences. And I feel like it's not, I feel like the whole process is an evolution, right? And you've been at it longer just as an individual, but I think what you talked us through, that Paramount is going through, is an evolution. And I would say at A&E, not dissimilar to what you just said, and I'm sure everyone else on the panel, we're going through the same. We are an environment that fully embraces flex working. So we have not mandated anyone return to the office. Everyone really enjoys that. We have some essential people who have no choice. They have to go, and that's the role they're in. We have people that have to be commutable, but by and large, everyone has been allowed to embrace flexibility and define it for themselves. And I think what we're finding is it's been a little bit of a competitive differentiator for us, where we might lack on some things, we win on that. And it's been interesting to find talent in other parts of the country. So it's been a good journey. I think where we are still a work in progress is finding those purposeful interactions. And when we do get together, it's like kismet and magical and wonderful and like your favorite family reunion ever. but what is the right mix of that, right? And people like, this is great, I'll see you in 6 months. So how do we get to what the right cadence should be? We're taking a little bit of some cues from our employee population, but we are, definitely trying to figure out what purposeful interactions look like. And it's been great for us with respect to building our workforce. Kia, I would love to hear what's going on in your neck of the woods with respect to flexible working.
Yeah, sure. Not too different than what both you and Nicole talked about. I will tell you, I think what worked well in our particular situation is we really empowered our leaders to connect with their teams, to do team agreements, to facilitate how you best work. And so instead of sort of being very prescriptive from a macro company level, let the leaders who are day in and day out with their teams architect what that interaction needs to look like. I think that's gone pretty well for a lot of our teams. They, in doing that, have been able to try to figure out, okay, when we need times for a collaboration, or, a lot of times innovation happens very organically, and oftentimes you sort of have to be together in a community for some of that organic ideation to happen, but let the teams determine how to best approach that. So I think that's worked very well for us. Mm-hmm. What is very challenging though, and I don't know that there are any right answers to this, I think this is just something we're going to have to learn and grow together as people in business now. And that is, flexibility really is in the eye of the beholder. So, what may be a good set of days for you to come in and work may be different for me. I may want to do 5 days, all half days, or I may just want to do a week a month, or this or that. Any flavor of this is so specific to the individual. And so part of the things we are trying to sort through, and I think a lot of employers are trying to sort through, is how do you make sure you still have the right levels of engagement and innovation and collaboration. But another thing that spawns from this is, how do you make sure you also have the right sense of career equity for people who, particularly if you're in cultures where, you need that exposure, if you're the person who opts to be remote all the time, how do we ensure that, you're not at a disadvantage because of that flexibility choice that doesn't afford you the same kind of exposure? Mm-hmm. And it's a tough thing. It's really tough to solve for, but I think a lot of organizations are going to be facing, how do you get after ensuring that you have some of those senses, particularly as it relates to career equity and advancement, as people make these different choices about when and how they work.
That's a big one, Kia. We are rolling out hybrid training for that purpose. It's what, obviously, what are the set of guiding principles for how to work in a hybrid workforce, but also here are the things to watch for. And that's a big one we talk about. And hopefully we get it mostly right, but it's a work in progress. It's an evolution. I don't want to miss this. We did have a question come in on the chat. I'm going to throw it to the panel. How do you think we can encourage leaders to trust their employees remotely so it's comfortable for all parties? Does anybody want to offer up a perspective?
I think Kia talked a little bit about that already, but it's trust but verify, right? Look, this is what I think is hard, is that in the past, leaders and managers could lead by observing the inputs. Yeah. And now we have to lead by measuring and calibrating on the outputs. And I don't know that our leaders know what a reasonable output is yet. So, you can't just see Bobby sitting in his chair from 9 to 5 and know Bobby's working. P.S. You could never have known that before anyway, because Bobby was probably on Instagram. But, it's now, what do we expect a reasonable person to be doing in this time? And do we see that output? And I think it's hard. So I do, I do have some sympathy for that difficulty, because I think getting to a point where you feel comfortable assessing what to expect and being diligent about that is a difficult skill to build for our leaders. So we can help them with that.
Yeah, I would add to that. I do think it's difficult, but I do think it helps turn the knob a little bit. Like, when you were having a performance challenge, right? question or doubt, I think we've always asked leadership to kind of come in and be a little bit more crisp on expectations of that individual. I'm not sure that changes, right? So I think it's that capability to say, look, it's going to create a little bit of management oversight, but to the point Rachel made, maybe that was always needed there, because just because a person was sitting, a human being was sitting in front of, at their desk didn't necessarily mean productivity was coming forth. So I do think it changes the conversation a little bit, but especially where there is areas of doubt, it's just kind of follow up and make sure you're seeing that outcome.
Yep, exactly.
I would just add real quick that, being remote for so long, one thing that I coach employees for is you have to show your wins a little bit more than you probably did in the office. So being able to let your manager know, what have you been working on? What progress have you been making? Having a running one-on-one list of, these are the things I've done since the last one-on-one, just being more overt about it. And I absolutely agree that we should have been doing more expectations, clearer expectations, and more communication and more check-ins and more documentation this entire time. But when you are in a remote situation, it goes a huge way to be able to show, hey, this is what I've been working on and where I'm making progress. And it feels good too.
Yeah, I think communication and engagement is more important than ever used to be. You have to make a point to do it. And I started at A&E in January of 2020. So I had like 45 days in the workplace and then no more. And I didn't really know anybody yet. And one day in about April, one of our senior guys, a peer of mine, but not in HR, calls me and he's like, "Hey, Rav, how's it going?" I'm like, "Hi, how are you?" And I instinctively said, "What can I do for you?" And he said, "Nothing. I was just calling to see how you're doing. Wanted to make sure you're assimilating. You're feeling good." And I'm like, "Oh, I wouldn't have thought to bother you without purpose." And he's like, "Bother away." So it shifted my paradigm. Now I call people all the time and you'd be like, "Hey, Kia, what's shaking? You got 5 minutes? How's it going? How is your family? Okay, I'll see you later." And if we can set that example, maybe it gets catchy and other people do it and you figure out how to substitute the water cooler for the 3-minute drive-by on Zoom or Teams. But we have to have that communication and those touch points. There was a bolt-on question to Kia's question that I don't want to lose in the chat. And it is, to Kia's answer, which is, how can managers tackle a hybrid environment when the expectation isn't truly flexible? Like, employees are expected to be in the office either Monday or Friday. And I think Kia has been speaking to this. And it goes back to the point we're making, Kia, around how people personally define flexibility. I don't know if any of you have some thoughts around how leaders can better show up for their employees in this space.
Yeah, I can say that one thing that we've been trying to do, because sometimes we do try and get teams to agree on a day, and obviously it's not going to work for everyone, but saying how much of that day you come in, how you adjust for your commute time, if you want to leave early, like giving people as much flexibility and choice, even if it's within a parameter. Mm-hmm. I'm really big on asking the team, please make requests. Like, complaints, I don't really know what to do with, but requests, I really want to meet. Like, requests are actionable. So anything you request, I will listen to. And so really getting them in that frame of mind to say, within this parameter, what can we do?
Love it.
I have a number of colleagues on the call from Hearst Television, and this is an ongoing conversation I've been having with that CEO, because broadcast television requires a lot of people to be in the building just to put the news on the air. And so he's trying to figure out how to thread that needle with his broader population. And something I think is an interesting just thought exercise is, there is a bias called the anchoring bias, which is, what are you comparing the current offer to? And we have shifted our anchoring bias from, at Hearst at least, prior to the pandemic, it was 5 days a week in the office, non-negotiable, to now our anchoring point is fully remote. And so I think there's something around the narrative we're telling and how we can somehow re-anchor people to say, it's for those businesses where there is more flexibility than there was 3 years ago, to celebrate that as the win, as opposed to making it a loss from being fully remote. And so I haven't accomplished that yet, right? So I don't have the answer, but there's something around how we're telling the story and to remind people how far we've come in some of our businesses versus what had been expected 3 years ago.
I love that. That is a paradigm shift, and we're all working to figure out where the paradigm is once the dust settles. I am conscious of time, and we have like 75 seconds. And there was an interesting suggestion in the chat that I think I want to embrace before we open up for questions, and that is a lightning round on whether each of you think the Great Resignation is a real sort of passing trend or overstated. Who wants to go first?
I think TBD, right? I mean, I think I'm not at all surprised by the bump in attrition we've had post-pandemic, because there had been a major depression in attrition prior, right? So if you think about people leaving as water flowing on a river, there was a beaver built a dam, and now the dam broke and people have moved who would have moved previously. So I think I've expected a little bit what we've seen to date. I think the question in my mind is what persists.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree. You know, when you asked the question, I almost wanted to say, well, Ravena, I think it's both. Because, seeing some of our talent acquisition and our business partners try to respond to the needs of the business and retaining people and just trying to find people has been very difficult. And you just saw some things happening in the marketplace that you never saw before. But now at some point, as things are just cyclical in economies, I don't know how much of that is sustainable because of how things tend to shift and move. So I would say, I don't think the Great Resignation was overstated. I think our teams felt every bit of that as they've worked the last year, but I don't know that we will carry that fully into the future. So that's why I say it's both.
Yeah, I would characterize it as, I don't think it was overstated. I fully agree. And I think we will continue to reimagine and rethink. So maybe the grass isn't greener. We'll figure that out to a lesser, to a smaller extent than what we thought. But I don't think that we're done thinking about what we want and what we want our works and lives to be. I think that gene is we're going to dig in and it will evolve.
Yeah. Well said. I don't know that I would add anything to that last part. I think as much as companies respond, I think people are also settling, right, into new ways of working. And then out of that, we'll see that shift maybe cause some more people to reopen their decisions about, are they happy about their current situation, or some of it just slowly start to kind of settle.
Yep. I think that's a good point, Sissy. I think the only thing I would add is that for me, and I could be wrong, I feel it's cyclical. Like the labor market is always cyclical. I feel like it was 15 years ago that we were using the phrase, the war on talent. So it's just one of those ebbs and flowing moment. The question which remains to be seen, which is what Rachel started us off with, is where the new normal settle. And we don't know where that is yet. This has been fun. I think we should jump into the Q&A. There are two that I can see already in the chat that I'll tackle really quick. The first is, how do you handle situations where the leaders are fully remote, but they are asking their teams to be hybrid or fully on site?
That's me.
Nicole, that was all you.
That's my world. I think you have to handle it, honestly and really transparently, and not hide behind that, and to really make a genuine case for being in the office. So that is my situation. And believe me, I think about it all the time. One thing that I found really helpful is, I have employees in all different locations around the world. And so when we do a global all hands, we sometimes break out with the people who are in LA and in New York and in Spain, et cetera. And we just, whether those employees are, and then the fully remote employees, and we talk about like what, we make our requests, and we talk about what days would be fun to come in and what could we do when we come in. And we actually set aside some dedicated time so that it's like kind of like that party atmosphere of, oh, I want to come in on Thursdays because I know that, everyone can do that and there's going to be benefit from it. So it's really just trying to let the team navigate what best looks like there, but also being really upfront that in some cases, people aren't going to necessarily get their first work model based on the role, and to be really upfront about how I feel about that. And sometimes it's awkward, and to acknowledge that.
Life's about choices, isn't it? Anyone else want to add to that before I ask the next question? I don't see lips moving. Okay, so for hybrid employees, do we as a collective have suggestions to encourage employees to come into the office and collaborate in person and virtually?
I think we've talked about a few of them, right? But to me, I always think about the carrot versus the stick, and what are the carrots we can offer in the workplace. I personally, I like being in the workplace. I derive a lot of energy from that, and so I'm always happier when there are more people around. But at Hearst, we've been doing things like Tower Tuesdays, where in the main headquarters we have events, reasons to come in, free lunch, right? And I think those obviously aren't things that you can sustain forever, but especially in a moment of transition, if you can give some carrots, some why I should come today, it can help to remind people of the benefit that they have from seeing their colleagues occasionally. And so, we've always had talking about policies and expectation setting. That's all well and good, I guess, but I'd much prefer that we create the reasons for people to be here as opposed to forcing people to come in.
I love that. I'll just add that at A&E, as I mentioned, we're fully flexible, however you define that. But we actually do have, especially in our sales areas, collaboration days, and we call them that, and we get groups of people together, totally optional. It started off small, but the more we have them, this interesting dynamic of FOMO comes, and the people that were there last Tuesday celebrate and happy, and they look rejuvenated from all this touching and feeling and being together. The FOMO kicks in, and next thing you know, the following week, there are more people at the collaboration day, and it has grown to this thing where like the whole department will come in for collaboration day. And I think that sort of was, born the purposeful interaction philosophy. As long as there's a reason, I don't think people mind. You just have to state the reason for the togetherness.
Ravena, can you describe what you do in collaboration day?
Sure. So like our ad sales department, for example, will get together on, purposefully in person to talk about a strategy around a client or a big deal that they're working on. And they'll also get in a room and show like clips of future content that we're building, things that they can look at to sell to. And so it's nice to sit down with the popcorn and kind of observe a 5-minute clip about the next thing that we're trying to launch. And do that all together. It can be done virtually, but it just has a different feel when you're all together. And so people feel like they're missing out if they don't come in person to do that, the big room and all the rest of it. So, yeah, it's great. And I'm doing one with my team in September, and we're gonna do fiscal 23 goal planning and share a meal, which we miss. Anyone else want to add? Okay.
Yeah, I'd say we've done some similar things as well. I think a host of different ideas. I think we're all going to be more creative about it, but I think just having intentional, we've had team meetings come on site, people come in. For leadership, we did talent review and just had some of those conversations that I think flow a little bit better at the room.
Yeah.
But we made a day of it as much as we could and kind of celebrated, and people genuinely felt the energy of being back together with colleagues, especially that they hadn't seen in a while. So it's a little bit about how do you keep that energy and momentum. I think we're just going to be thoughtful about that as we go forward.
Yeah, I agree. I think people don't mind making the effort as long as it feels purposeful. All right, well, there are no more questions in the chat. So I want to take a minute to thank this phenomenal panel of ladies. I really enjoyed it. Nicole, Rachel, Sissy, and Kia, thank you so much. Kia, I will turn it over to you now to close us out.
Thank you, Ravena, and thank you, panel members. It's been great today. So, wow, this has been an amazing 3 days. On behalf of C2HR, thank you to all of our speakers and you for joining us to explore the future of work. We've tackled a lot of important topics throughout the conference, but the learning doesn't end here. I invite you to take full advantage of all that C2HR has available for you. The online HR Knowledge Center, the Exchange networking forums, our webinars, and HR Pulse, the C2HR newsletter. Be on the lookout for emails with information on how to tap into these great resources and take some time to explore our website at c2hr.org. All of these resources are free for C2HR members, thanks to the generous support of our C2HR champions and all of our amazing sponsors. Please show them some love by visiting the sponsor section of this platform. And after 3 years of a virtual C2HR conference, I am thrilled to announce that our 2023 conference will be held live and in person in Brooklyn on August 7th and 8th. I hope to see you there. Until then, be well, my friends. Take care.